Who are the Aztecs and what happened to them? I remember that the first-class boxer Fernando Vargas, the youngest champion in the history of the first middleweight, was harshly fucked by his compatriots throughout his short career. At the same time, the reason for this was this: Vargas has no Aztec roots at all. What a Mexican, he's a Spaniard, they said, expressing dissatisfaction with his origin. Therefore, I will answer the question, what happened to the Aztecs right away? They became Mexicans by switching to Spanish. At the same time, they have largely preserved the features of their Native American culture. Unlike the Mayans, who lived in the jungle and therefore, as a people, were completely preserved, the Aztecs settled more accessible lands and therefore assimilated and became the basis for a new people. However, they have not physically disappeared anywhere. A significant part of the Mexicans are their descendants. Now let's tell you what it was for the people. In the understanding of the inhabitants of pre-Columbian America, the Aztec is a man from Aztlan, the northwestern region at the junction of present-day Mexico and the United States. 5 to 6 centuries before the foundation of the Aztec Empire, the migration of hunter-gatherer tribes started from there, which later settled and conquered the declining southern civilizations. These were not necessarily representatives of the peoples to which those whom we now call the Aztecs belonged, as well as the bulk of their subjects. Whereas in the power that conquered a significant part of Mesoamerica, there was no single self-designation for its population. Residents of the leading city of Tenochtitlan preferred to call themselves Mexique or Tenochtki, and the rest of the subjects were named after the names of their cities. Names and titles sound complicated, but in fact, the same thing was happening there as all over the planet. There was a constant struggle for power, in which the strong suppressed the weak. I think if we transfer local terms to Italian soil, it will become clearer to many readers. After the migration of the northern nomadic tribes to the south, the Nahua peoples conquered and dissolved the Toltecs. These are such American Etruscans, a more advanced nation from which everyone studied. In the Valley of Mexico, a Latin union was founded, led by the dominant city of Azcapotzalco. The Mexics came almost later than everyone else and were driven out several times by stronger tribes, but in the end they founded the city of Tenochtitlan on one of the small lake islands. At first they were forced to obey the hegemons, but they got rich during raids and tribal wars, concluded an agreement with 2 neighboring cities and managed to subdue Azcapotzalco. After that, it was the turn of other Latins, i.e. independent city-states inhabited by the peoples of the Nahua group. And then the rest of the Indian policies that were on this fertile land. Over time, Tenochtitlan became completely dominant in the Aztec 3-city region and even got the opportunity to appoint leaders there. At the peak of its capabilities and strength, its population was more than 200,000 people. It was about the same as in Constantinople at that time, more than in Paris 185,000, more than in Venice 130,000. As for the other cities of the state, the population of the Union policy of Tlatelolco was about 10 times smaller, and the population of other cities of the state was 10 to 20. This advantage was achieved thanks to the Chinamp agricultural machinery, which allowed an average of 7 harvests per year. In addition, the capital was located on an island. This allowed fishing or shrimp. Animals, except dogs and turkeys, were not bred here. But some were received as tribute or by trade. Since the Americans did not know pack animals and wheels, any cargo was delivered by people. The power that was eventually created by the Aztecs somewhat resembled the early Roman Republic: complete non-interference in the internal affairs of the conquered, the desire to rely on local elites, the admission of Mexique traders to all subordinate areas, the collection of tribute and a military alliance. However, the Latin Union was also religious, and the Nahua did not have a single cult. There were common gods, but they were worshipped without any centralization. Attempts by one of the Aztec rulers to raise the status of their tribal god Huitzilopochtli did not lead to proper unification. And the degree of independence of subjects and taxes, apparently, did not reach the Roman standards. Therefore, historians often compare the Aztec state with ancient Assyria, believing that it was a military hegemony focused only on collecting tribute. A strong center, loose suburbs that obey from case to case. Nevertheless, the elite of dependent policies under the Aztecs prospered quite well, and the population grew steadily. They built roads no worse than the Roman ones so that they could conduct trade and, if necessary, punish the rebellious vassals. Uprisings happened often. The Aztecs, like in the Holy Roman Empire, had an elective monarchy, and after the accession of a new sovereign, he was forced to immediately conduct a military campaign against rebellious cities. Over time, this became a tradition, and after the coronation, the new emperor immediately went on a campaign. Sometimes he even annexed new lands and not only pacified the old ones. Moctezuma I failed to overcome the opposing policies, after which he introduced the practice of flower wars, small exhausting raids to capture prisoners, which were later modified into ritual wars similar to those that Sparta declared to its helots. In general, the religion of this prosperous people was strongly associated with the cult of death. In order for the sun not to stop, but to continue its heavenly path, it was necessary to regularly sacrifice captives to it. And so war and faith were inseparable for the Aztecs. Each male warrior received full status only after capturing several slaves. The military culture of Mexique was aimed not at killing, but at taking the enemy alive and relatively whole. Their complex of weapons and psychology pursued exactly this goal, which undoubtedly prevented them from fighting the Spaniards, who were used to total war. But the policy of the flower wars was much more hindered by the fact that for its sake independent cities were preserved in the very center of the Aztec state. The Tlaxcalans made an alliance with the arriving Cortes and managed to overthrow the power of their overlords. In gratitude for this, their country was exempted from taxes, and this continued until the independence of Mexico. However, after the Spanish conquest, even despite unfamiliar diseases, the Aztecs did not go away. Their nobility received equal rights with the Spanish and soon assimilated with it through mixed marriages. And the commoners remained the same rural workers, except that they switched to the Castilian language.